Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution, have just been suddenly thrown back into the mix together. How can we possibly have the slightest idea of what to expect?
Hello, and welcome back to the NeoJurassic podcast. I'm your host, Bri, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the second installment of our two-parter, Deinocheirus Terrificus. So in last week's episode, we were introduced to the idea of a herd of Deinocheirus establishing a breeding colony in the Everglades, and the potential messiness that would arise trying to deal with such a crisis. In my opinion, people would undoubtedly find the charisma of these hulking, bizarre beasts utterly irresistible, and economic opportunities like Deinocheirus tourism, for instance, would no doubt spring up around them in no time at all. As we learned, a very similar situation is currently playing out down in Colombia. We spoke with Dr. Jonathan Shurin, who has been researching the ecological impacts of 100+ feral hippopotamus that are flourishing and spreading throughout Colombia's waterways. The Colombian government have found themselves at an impasse as to how to manage the population. Are they to be accepted as a naturalized species, or do measures need to be taken to prevent them from expanding their range and population even further, as they no doubt will? Before we go any further, though, I would like to apologize very sincerely for the quality of the audio at certain points in this episode's interview. I unfortunately encountered some technical issues during our conversation, and my end of the interview got pretty gnarled up. I hope y'all don't find it too distracting and you're able to make out the audio. I had to do some re-recording of certain lines that were just hopelessly lost to the digital ether. This episode may have been cursed in some capacity, as I encountered some type of technical snafu or disaster at every step of the way, and I hope it's not too apparent, but it probably is. Anyway, this week we're going to be headed to South Florida and hear about the current invasive crisis unfurling throughout the Everglades and beyond. Granted, the invasive critters are significantly smaller and less exotic than either the Deinocheirus or the hippopotamus, but they're no less destructive. Guiding us through the murky waters and thick reeds of the Everglades is Jenna Cole. Jenna is a self-described reptile researcher, biologist, and graduate student at the University of Florida. To start things off, Jenna is going to tell us about the path that led her towards conservation research in the Everglades, and also about the work she's been doing to mitigate a booming population of very hungry, very prolific, and pretty cute, in my opinion, invasive tegu lizards.
So, let's see. I actually came down to Florida in over the summer in July 2016, and I came down as a tech. So I came down to do field work straight out of undergrad, and was thinking about grad school. Wasn't sure if I was going to pursue a second degree or not, but got a great opportunity working down in South Florida, and thought, why not? I might as well take a chance and see where I end up. And once I got down here, the Tegu project was ready, like very readily available to be worked on. It takes a lot of effort, so that is the project when I started working with that I was put on most frequently. And eventually, after 2 years of working on it as a tech, I started managing the project. So I've been managing it since 2018 and have been working since then. So it just it's not like I came down here, I guess, specifically to work with tegus or anything like that. It's just that I happened to show up around the same time that work with them was really, really peaking. Burmese pythons get a lot of attention here in South Florida. They're big, they're bad, they're impressive. And so they tend to get the spotlight a lot, but the tegu is an animal that's been in South Florida for quite some time now as well, and just doesn't seem to get as much recognition, but is definitely just as much of a problem. So the work with that had just started ramping up when I came down, and I just happened to kind of fall in line with it, and I've been working on the tegus down here ever since.
So tell me, when did the tegus officially become like a concern? When did their little wanted posters start getting slapped up on the palm trees of South Florida?
Oh gosh, off the top of my head, I think it's probably the early 2000s they kind of showed up. I think there was one main introduction, and they just kind of started showing up all over. So we do have two populations of them in Florida. The one that I work with down in the Homestead, Miami-Dade County area, and then there is another population in Hillsborough County, which is like western central Florida.
Oh, that's where I'm from, actually.
Yeah, so there's some up there as well. And
I didn't know that. That's crazy. Any particular part of Hillsborough County that you're aware of?
I couldn't tell you exactly where, but they're in Hillsborough County. I don't believe the population is as large necessarily as they are down here in South Florida. The area that they're in here in South Florida is really huge. It's they spread from the natural area into a lot of like the developmental areas, and I believe Hillsborough, a lot of that area, they're in like a lot of pine, a lot of scrub habitat, rockland habitat. So, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how much bigger the South Florida population necessarily is compared to Hillsborough.
So how is the distinction made between an introduced non-native species and an invasive species? And how long does it take to assess all the necessary data to make that call?
So that's a really good question. I've actually had people ask me that. We get a lot of questions, especially regarding like other introduced exotics that are not necessarily considered invasives, like the chameleons are a good one everyone always brings up. Generally, an animal that is considered an invasive species is one that has been shown to do damage to the ecosystem. So a lot of those terms are just like based off of the research that has, or maybe the lack thereof. So chameleons are a great one. People generally don't think of them as being an invasive animal because they live in trees, they eat bugs, they're not really competing with anything. They just kind of hang out, right? And so those get a lot of attention because people think they're really cool. People love to look for them. I know they have pockets all over South Florida, and I've heard some even go up as far as like the Orlando area and even a little further north. I'm not sure how.
Veileds have been known to eat smaller lizards. So I would imagine they'd be a threat to green anoles if they're in the same genus.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's where the lack of research really comes in. So there's not really a lot of attention going towards the chameleons that I'm aware of, at least. I think mostly because a lot of the populations are like seeded populations. They're from individuals who release them on purpose and then with the intent to breed. So a lot of them get moved around really frequently. As soon as you are aware of one population, if word gets out, that population gets moved. So it's not always the easiest to learn about their diet or their habits or anything like that. They're also pocket size. People go and pluck them out of trees, and then they'll wipe a spot clean. Now with other animals like the tegus, for example, they're not as easily. Not as cryptic, just as cryptic, but not as easily to like move around as cryptically. Like chameleons, you can pick them up and move them around. It might be a little bit before anybody figures out they're there, but tegus, they're going to be there, and you're going to know it very quickly. So, but back to the root of your question is really it's just the research and how much damage they're able to be shown to do to the environment. If there's a lack of study or a lack of knowledge regarding an animal that's been introduced, you can't say, oh, this is an invasive without having the science to back it up, essentially. Right. And so you can say, well, this animal is most likely going to become invasive or is most likely going to have an impact. But, we can't say that something is going to have an impact if we haven't researched it. So that's going to be the big issue. And as far as how long it takes to give them that status, it just depends on how long it takes us to, meet other researchers to figure out exactly what they're doing. Diet is like the biggest and easiest way, in my opinion, to look at. It's also, one of the things I'm most interested in is diet. But by looking at the diet, you can see direct predation upon different native animals, and by that you can assess the threat. So it's like if they're focusing all of their energy eating specifically one type of animal, or like the pythons, they eat mammals, and we were able to see the decline in mammals very quickly. So it's that kind of stuff. But even pythons, they're so cryptic. They've been introduced for a while before we were really even able to grasp how many of them might potentially be out there, or even really start to notice. So it can take years to come to see a direct impact, but you can usually use models to come up with an estimated impact and go from there to kind of determine like the threat a species has on the ecosystem.
Yeah. I have to be honest, I've been completely fascinated by all of the non-native species that are being dispersed across the world. Florida and Hawaii being two of the most significant ones that I'm interested in. Hawaii, of course, has, Jackson's chameleons all over the place that are similarly harvested like the veiled chameleons are in Florida. And there's gold dust day geckos from Madagascar there, and dart frogs. Are you aware presently of just how many non-native species have become have established like workable populations in Florida at this point? I moved to Florida in the mid 90s, and brown anoles were just everywhere at that time. And it seems like that would be a native species, but of course it's not. And every day I hear about some other new vertebrate that has been established in Florida. How extensive is this new world that's popping up in Florida?
So I can actually give you a couple numbers that I have. There was a Crisco paper that was published in 2016. So as of that paper's what they put out, there are at least 181 species of reptiles and amphibians that have been introduced to Florida, and over 60 of those species have become established and are breeding in South Florida. So, it's a lot. It's a lot of different vertebrates that have been introduced, and that is just reptiles and amphibians. That's not counting plants, insects, or anything else going on.
To your knowledge, are there any birds that are non-native established?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how established they are, but there's a whole bunch of different parakeets and different parrots. So I know there's macaws down here. I'm not sure how established they are, but they do pop up every now and then in different pockets throughout Miami. And there are a couple different parakeet species, different like Quaker parakeets, and all those down here. So there's a handful of different parrots that do pop up.
Are you familiar with the Carolina parakeet?
I am not.
Okay. Are you familiar with conure parrots at all? They're sometimes called parakeets. It was a native North American conure, essentially, that was eradicated between the 19th and 20th century and is now extinct. And to your knowledge, is there any conversation in your circles about how these established populations of parakeets and Quaker parrots may be filling ecological niches that were once... I guess you probably wouldn't know since you don't know about the Carolina parakeet, but that's something that I would be curious to know.
Yeah, when it comes to birds specifically, I don't have a lot of knowledge on what's going on, but I understand what you're saying about how if some of these either predators or other smaller species can fill other roles within the ecosystem. I know with pythons, I've heard it put out there a couple times that people are saying, oh, well, pythons will replace the panthers. And, there's obviously a couple points, there that you could go through, and, they are definitely both top predators, but they fill different roles and they feed on different levels of the ecosystem, and
they reproduce in a completely different way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I have heard people say that with the pythons before. So, it does get talked about occasionally, but generally speaking, they're not similar enough. And with the parrots, I would think, there might be a species or two who may be able to fill a similar ecological role, but with how many different species are present, and I really want to say there's 5 or 6 different parrot species that are around. And of course, I'm not 100% sure what their impacts are since I don't really work with them.
Yeah, yeah.
But I would think that since it is more than just, one species that has become established, that while they potentially could fill a similar ecological role and fulfill that missing role in the ecosystem, just due to the sheer number of different species that are present, they probably end up really competing with each other in other species of native birds, really more so than just fulfilling that missing gap, just because there's more than one.
Totally.
So just increases competition.
It's so I'm again really interested in this kind of stuff, and here in Southern California in Los Angeles, there are, I believe, 13 to 14 established non-native varieties of parrot that live in Southern California, which is crazy to me. And they haven't been determined as being invasive as far as I know. And a major part of that is because so many fruit and nut trees have been planted throughout Southern California that like an entirely new ecosystem has been developed alongside humans that these parrots are then taking advantage of. And it's like a really bizarre, fascinating angle to look at, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting to see like little like pocket ecosystems form in the little niches, especially in urban habitats and urban landscapes. A lot of the times the native species we have a hard time adjusting when the landscape becomes really disturbed and urbanized. So it's really interesting when you have those species come in and kind of take up that space.
Why do you suppose the tegus have been so successful? I mean, again, there are so many other species that have been introduced in Florida, but the tegus really seem to be flourishing, and their habitat isn't like a one-to-one replica of their native environment. So has there been much discussion as to like what it is about this environment that has them flourishing?
So the thing with species that end up getting termed, invasive, what I think it really comes down to is the adaptability of the animal. If you have an animal that, like, the habitat is not necessarily exactly the same as they would have in their native range, but they are tolerant of different climates. So they're able to kind of adapt to the ecosystem where they have been introduced. So it's not necessarily about, is this habitat perfect for them? And that is something that we're definitely studying and looking at and trying to figure out, where do we see them more often? Do we find them mostly in urban areas and agricultural fields, out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Everglades? We do look at that when we're studying them and are trying to use that to figure out better ways to manage the population, to trap and remove them. But generally what it really comes down to, I think, is the adaptability of that species. If you have a species that has a very specific requirement for its needs, to meet its needs, if it needs a specific temperature or a specific water feature, that would limit its ability to spread. So because tegus don't have that limit, they don't have that limiting factor, they're able to exploit a wide range of habitat. And that is absolutely one of the reasons they're able to flourish, is just because they do not have any super specific requirements to thrive.
They're largely omnivorous and kind of like just like a generalist snacker, right?
Yeah, they're like garbage cans. They just kind of eat everything.
Yeah, like the reptilian raccoon.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they eat a whole bunch of stuff. They eat various fruiting plants, insects of all sorts, different grasshoppers, spiders, snails. I've seen a couple snails in diet before. They do eat snakes and lizards, turtles as well, and then of course the eggs. So they'll eat turtle eggs. We've seen them. We've gotten video of them on an alligator nest raiding alligator eggs, which is really, which is really the big concern. Is just they're taking alligator eggs. So what's going to stop them from going after crocodile nests? And if they make it closer to the beaches, what about sea turtles? So it's definitely a really big concern.
Do you think that there might be a program similar to the Python pickup program established for the tegus sometime in the near future?
Yeah, I think they are trying to potentially look into contracting trappers in the future. I'm not sure where they are when it comes to that. I know I think last year they definitely had some at least one contracted trapper out. But I think they are going to try to push to get some contracts out. So instead of having contractors go out and just like manually catch tegus, the easiest way to capture and remove them is by setting traps and checking them. So I think at some point, maybe not as large as the Python program, but I think there probably will be contracts, funding available for contractors to go and trap and remove those tegus. I know there's I know there's a small scale of that going on right now. There's for sure a couple of contracted trappers out now, but I'm not sure how much that will grow in the future.
Totally. I wonder like how much of it has to do with like the sexiness of a Burmese python, this like 12-foot Burmese python versus like a 3.5-foot tegu. You know what I mean? In terms of like the drive to get people independently hunting these things. I'm curious how much of an impact that has on the movement.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting thing if someone were to go and study and do a like a social study and see how people react to tegus versus pythons. I think that would be a really interesting thing to see. But I definitely think that is, your assessment is absolutely correct. Like the Burmese python is a big, kind of sexy animal, right? It's big, it's scary. If you got to hand catch them,
Yeah.
And it's a big feat. So it's like when you go out and you grab, a 14, 15, 16 foot snake, that is, really appealing to people. And it's, not only is it a large animal to remove, but it's also an animal that people are really scared of. People don't like snakes. Lizards are a little bit more personable than snakes are. And so, there's not as much of a ooh, you caught a big lizard. Like that's just not as cool as saying I caught a 15-foot snake.
Yeah.
I definitely think that the appeal of being able to catch these, monster snakes definitely takes away from people's enthusiasm for the lizards, but it doesn't make them any less of a threat.
Totally. I'm also very curious. So, there's those rhesus macaques in Central Florida.
Yes.
It feels like wouldn't you agree that Florida has fairly lax laws concerning like exotics compared to most of the country?
I'm like kind of in the middle. So, since I do think that a lot of the laws that they have could be tightened for sure. I personally am of the opinion, I don't like, I know they've tried to ban a couple species recently. I personally am not a fan of bans, but I do like regulation. And I'm not familiar with all of the regulation for all the different species, but given the issues that we're having here, it probably would make sense to have a little bit more stricter regulations on different species. Not only that, but Florida is a very particular place. We have a whole lot of ports. There's a huge animal trade going on, and things escape. Whether they escape on cargo ships on their way here, on planes on their way in, or while they're in the possession of people who have them as pets or people who are planning on selling them. There's definitely a lot of places along the road from the time they enter Florida to the time they potentially are become a pet at someone's home, where they could potentially get out. And so I think more regulation is definitely a good way to go. But as far as comparing it to everywhere else, I think that is one of the things that makes Florida so unique, is that you can come here and you can have all these different animals. So it's a fine line. I myself keep a couple different reptile species, so it's definitely something that I feel pretty conflicted about, because as much as I love and support regulation, I also find myself between a rock and a hard place, because
Totally.
I know people who keep animals that I would never keep, but they keep them very well, and they keep them in great enclosures, and they give them a great quality of life. But then, there's always going to be people who are on the opposite end of that spectrum, who maybe keep animals that should be kept better or in better condition or in more secure enclosures. And so, what it really comes down to, I think, is the laws are not necessarily a little bit lax, but I think the way that they are enforced, I think probably could be better, because I think the way that the laws are structured right now really just they make it difficult. They make it difficult on the people who are trying to enforce them, and they make it difficult on the people who need to apply them to what they're keeping.
Mm. Are you familiar with the hippo situation in Colombia?
I'm not.
Oh, Pablo Escobar had a zoo, and he had a small population of like 4 or 5 hippopotamus. And when he was, allegedly killed and his compound was taken over, they didn't know how to handle the hippos, so they just kind of left them. And now there is a growing, flourishing population of hippos throughout this particular region of Colombia. And there's tremendous opposition in culling and managing the hippos from the local populace. And it's just a wildly fascinating situation to me. And I was just curious if you had heard of that or you're familiar with that at all.
I was not, but that is very interesting and hippos are not a joke.
No, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Like my concern with like the lax exotics, like knowing that there's so many people with like lemurs and all these charismatic megafauna down there that could easily just establish themselves somewhere like the Everglades, which is very nearby. I wonder how people would respond to that when you have a big, sexy, scary snake versus some larger, charismatic animal, like what is going to happen there? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting thing. I hope it never happens, but I definitely can see how something like that may cause an outcry from the public, especially when you do have those cute and cuddly animals.
Yeah, I feel like it's only a matter of time, unfortunately. People don't like animals getting killed.
Right.
They don't like them getting euthanized. And so these animals are destructive and they need to be managed in some way. And unfortunately, the only means of really doing that is, euthanizing them. Have you come across much opposition to the culling of the pythons and the tegus in your time?
Okay. I get what you're saying. You talked about the mammals first, and I was like, I don't know. I guess people would be angry about, euthanizing mammals. And I was like, I'm not really sure. But with the pythons and the tegus, you're always going to have people who don't agree with it. And think that everything, deserves to live or deserves a home. You do see it. I don't have a lot of experience with any pushback on it. To me personally, I haven't gotten any crazy emails or messages from people, being super upset about it. For the most part, with the pythons, I know people get really upset because they do kind of get flaunted. Here's this giant snake that I just caught, and most people look at those animals and think a trophy. Where you have, especially within the reptile community, a lot of the times the thought process is more so like this animal deserves to be treated with respect. And I definitely have seen, especially with various python hunters going out and posting what they have on social media and trying to get all of the attention. I have seen online and in comments on social media platforms, like people aren't very happy with the way that they're being presented. I think a lot of people generally understand why it has to happen, but the way that it's being pushed, especially with the drive to promote this kind of stuff online, it really does have a little bit of a pushback, but not necessarily like a straight outrage. I mean, we see it all the time. Just, say something about, trapping and euthanizing feral cats and people get very, very upset. So I've never seen anything to that extent. Obviously people get very passionate about, fuzzy furry creatures. And, although I work with tegus and pythons and, unfortunately have to euthanize them pretty regularly, I don't think I would be comfortable euthanizing, say a cat.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely that disconnect you have, but also it depends on the experience you have with it. If it's something that's normalized, within society, then it does make it a little bit easier. The snakes and the lizards, people don't generally, the general public don't really like them, so you don't get a lot of pushback. You don't get a lot of people coming after you, as long as things appear to be humane and aren't being, if you're not parading around a dead animal, people don't really seem to say too much.
They wouldn't notice necessarily unless they're confronted with the imagery.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you had any like really harrowing experiences in your adventures in the Everglades?
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things where it's like after doing it for so long, you forget what's normal and what's not normal.
Yeah.
There's definitely been a handful of, I like to think of them as like I call them happy endings, where we definitely have had a few animals that, different reptiles. There's been a couple different like small mountain monitors, like savanna monitors, and I believe there was a rhino iguana, just a couple different animals that, escaped or got away from their owners, who were reported, and they were able to be captured and then either used for other outreach and educational opportunities. And, as we've discussed previously, a lot of the times the animals that are captured after being released into the environment or escaping, unfortunately, their meets their ends through euthanasia. So there definitely have been, some happy things where we do get species that are able to be used for educational ambassadors or used for other outreach programs, which I think are really awesome. As far as any like super crazy, exciting stories, I had I don't know. I don't really find it that exciting. It's just normal now, but I did have, the pythons kind of follow you everywhere. And I did have a day last year, or I guess 2019 now, where I was driving home from a day in the Keys, and I happened to stop on the side of the road because I saw a 10-foot python. At the time I didn't realize it was a 10-foot python, and I'm about 5 feet tall and 115 pounds, so I'm quite small. And, so I did happen to be having a nice, fun, casual day on my way home from the Keys, and did stop and actually captured and removed a 10-foot python by myself on the side.
Wow. Good on you.
I was actually on the phone with a friend and was just like, I think I just saw a python in the grass on the side of the road. And, sure enough, backed my car up and was able to, find and catch the snake.
Did you have like a bag handy or something?
I did. I keep my work stuff in my vehicle at all times, so that I have it with me if I need it. So I did have a bag. You have to transport them in locked boxes. So I had a bag, I had a lockbox. So I was able to catch it and get it in a bag by myself. And
that is so rad.
It was it was one of those things. Like I was like, it was a moment. It definitely surprised me. But most commonly it's just I was on my way home. I wasn't expecting it, and so they do tend to pop up at the the funniest of times. But I was able to actually catch it, bag it, bring it to my work office so that we could deal with it accordingly. And I was actually on my way to one of my friends. He has a 6-year-old daughter who had a dance recital. So I was able to do all that, and I still made it before she went on stage. So it was a crazy day.
You're a 21st century ecological hero. And in your time in the Everglades, have you encountered any American crocodiles?
Yeah, actually I have. The other aspect, when I'm not doing invasive species work, I'm able to help out on a couple projects, actually surveying American alligators and American crocodiles in the Everglades and surrounding management areas. So I do encounter them quite frequently.
That's cool. Do you have a favorite Everglades friend? I mean, by that I mean animal of the Everglades, native.
Oh, my favorite, I love turtles. So if I come across any native turtle species while I'm out, I am thrilled. I always say it's never a good day until you see a turtle. And if you see a turtle, then, you're sad. Doesn't matter what happens the rest of the day. You could, accomplish anything. You can accomplish nothing. If you got to see that turtle, you're happy. So I love turtles. My first
Same.
favorite turtle are soft shells.
Yeah.
I love Florida soft shells. And then other than that, my other favorite things to see are the yellow rat snakes. I think yellow rat snakes are just one of the coolest species out there. And, that just might be, I'm originally from Maryland. So in Maryland, we just have black rat snakes.
Yeah.
And so coming to Florida and seeing these beautiful yellow snakes that, get just as big as the northern rats, just so cool. So I really love them as well. So those are probably my top. Any turtle and then the yellow rats are my 100% favorites.
Do you have any pet turtles currently?
I do. I actually have 2 diamondback terrapins and 2 Rhode Island snake necks.
Oh, cool. How long have you have a diamondback terrapin?
I do. I have two little ones that are relatively new additions. I think I've had them for 3 or 4 months now. So they're teeny.
They are the most magical freshwater terrapin I've ever seen in my life. You are so lucky.
They are awesome. They're actually one of the first species I ever worked with was diamondback terrapins in Maryland. So my first research experience, actually, while I was still in college, was working on a nesting project with terrapins right next to my hometown in Maryland, and I live right off of the Chesapeake Bay. So I was able to work with a research project with them on one of our Navy bases, or I guess it was an Air Force base, but. So that was a lot of fun. So that was my first research experience, and then that's where my love of turtles came from. And now I work with lizards.
Oh, what a swoon-worthy little world!
Oh, it's so great. Terrapins are they're super cute. They have a ton of personality. Just awesome animals.
Do you attend any reptile festivals or cons? I do. Yeah, I will just spend 20 minutes every time just marveling at all the little baby diamondback terrapins. Not only because they're so beautiful, but because they're now in a place where they can be, their numbers have, raised so much in captivity that you can now commonly see them at reptile shows. Is just kind of miraculous and wonderful to me.
Yeah, they're really cool. Here they're regulated, so I think you can only have 2 in your possession right now at a time. So we don't see them in hordes or groves or anything like that.
Yeah.
They are around. They're not as scarce as they used to be. I mean, coming from Maryland, they're very protected up there. So the fact that I could even come down here and see some of them at a Repticon was really cool.
Ironically, my interview with Jenna was filmed late last year, and today, as this episode was being scotch-taped to completion, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission has agreed to pass new legislation against the threat many of these exotic reptiles pose.
After years of the Everglades being overrun by invasive reptiles, the state is taking action tonight.
And the move is sure to throw a wrench in the exotic pet trade. Local 10 News reporter Janine Stanwood is live to explain. Janine.
And most people agree that the exotic pet trade is what got us into this mess in the first place. So today, wildlife officials met. They took comments from members of the public, and there will be new rules pretty soon. Invasive tegus and iguanas have overrun our native ecosystem. And today, after an online meeting with public comment, Florida wildlife officials made the decision to ban people from owning, breeding, or selling them, as well as other so-called high-risk reptiles like Burmese pythons, which are already banned as pets.
Am I bagging them or what?
Yep, we're bagging them.
Proponents of the ban say these reptiles, when let loose, have already wreaked havoc on our native ecosystem. But there's been pushback from breeders and sellers who argue they've been helping to get rid of the invasive species, and selling them gives them incentive to keep hunting. Tegu hunter Rodney Irwin, who we met near Homestead, says he's on the fence about the new rule and is in contact with other breeders around the state to figure out what to do next. And at last check, Fish and Wildlife commissioners were still meeting, and so the details about these new rules, they still haven't even been posted on FWC's website. We keep refreshing. One thing we can say, though, is that if you do have a pet green iguana or a tegu, right now you can keep it, but you have to have a permit. Again, those rules, those regulations, they will be posted soon. We'll stay tuned.
up to 16 species of non-native reptiles have been effectively banned from being owned, sold, or exported from the state. For better or worse, this move has seemed to me to be almost inevitable. All the same, my heart is heavy for each and every party that may be affected by this outcome. Before we conclude the Deinocheirus and the Everglades two-parter, I'd like to end on something on a little bit of a brighter note: Jurassic Fantasies. A while back, I put out a call for any interested Jurassic fans to join me for a future Jurassic Fantasy segment, and you're about to experience just such an exchange. Alice joined me all the ways over from England, and we had a thoroughly delightful time chatting about her love of Jurassic, her hopes for the future of the franchise, and her two adorable Python pals. So what is your relationship with the Jurassic franchise? How did it start for you?
Wow. For me, it started when my dad sat me down and said, "Oh, because when I was younger, I had these boxes of dinosaurs that I used to play with and stuff." And he said, "Oh, there's this film that I think you're old enough to watch now. I don't think it's going to scare you because it came out the year I was born." So he was very much like, "I think you're old enough to watch this now," and I was about 8. And he was like, "I think you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. Okay. You know what these things are. They're not real, all this sort of stuff. Like on the screen, they're not real." And I remember being sat there and I was so excited. I loved it so much that like the T-Rex, everything was great until the classic kitchen scene. And I was hiding away.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't stand it. Managed to go back and rewatch it and loved it. And then from there,
yeah.
Anything Jurassic, I needed it. So we watched The Lost World together, Jurassic Park 3. I watched my dad, because I was still quite young, he would watch them first and just make sure that there was nothing too crazy. And Lost World I was absolutely fine with, but Jurassic Park 3 was really funny because he was like, "Okay, this one's a little bit, the dinosaur's a bit bigger, so I don't, you know, be careful watching it. If it's scary at any point, we'll pause it," and this sort of stuff. And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." And I burst into tears at the most weird, for him, the weirdest moment. And it's when the juvenile T-Rex is killed by the Spinosaurus. And I was bawling my eyes out. Like I couldn't.
I don't think that's so weird.
We had to stop the whole thing, and my dad was like, "What's wrong? What is it? Oh my god, what's wrong? I thought this was fine." I was like, "I killed the T-Rex. I've done it. I can't believe it." He was like, "Oh no!" He was like, "What? That's what?" He thought I was going to get upset with the.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, but it just but I think from there it kind of grew, just anything Jurassic since then. It's been like Christmas and birthdays. There's always like a T-shirt or a figure or something. We like this year last year for Christmas we got a Jurassic Park doormat, so you know it's still ongoing.
Yeah, there's no sign of it stopping for me, that's for sure.
No, definitely.
So would you say that you've had a fascination with dinosaurs and animals prior to seeing the movie?
Definitely. So when I was really small, I don't really remember how it exactly started, but from what I understand, my nan and granddad gave me a brachiosaur that I've got in the other room, and it's actually, I could never pass it on because it's actually one of the really old classic lead painted ones. So it's like you can't do anything with it.
With that, yeah.
It's just got to stay away. But back then, obviously, we thought it was fine, and the tail's got like little bite marks where I've chewed it when I was little and stuff, and so it grew from there, and then and then my parents showed me the time, the cartoon kind of aspect of dinosaurs came up, and I used to watch. It was called The Dinosaur Family or something like that. It was a really random TV show, and I watched Dinotopia, and it all kind of built in. And then as I've got older and ended up with the Jurassic films, that actually then sparked an interest of what could I have that is like a dinosaur but not a dinosaur. So now I keep snakes, and so it's kind of thrown that interest in and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I love dinosaurs. Just when I was younger, I just had some sort of fascination with them that I don't even know where it came from, because my parents, they like them, but they're not like mad about them. So it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
But
what kind of snakes do you have?
I have ball pythons. I have 2 of them.
Oh, cool.
And one of them's actually called Blue, after Our Lady.
Aw. Yeah.
So, they're pretty cool. And the other one, Jasper, has a black stripe across his eye, which is quite similar to the Utahraptors in the Walking with Dinosaurs series. So I get excited about that sometimes.
How old are they?
So Blue she's not even a year old yet. She's still quite small. And Jasper is a year and 3 months. So he's almost fully grown. But yeah, they're both still young, bless them.
Oh, cool. Sweet. What do you think it is about the Jurassic franchise in particular, and the Jurassic World, that connects with you so strongly?
I think it's the constant start, like each film starts with people being like, this is wrong, you shouldn't have done this, these animals shouldn't have been brought back, and they don't even look the way they would, and there's all this moral argument. But by the time you get to the end of the film, someone kind of finds some sort of connection or some sort of understanding and empathy for them, which I think is amazing. Usually in like monster films, it's like you kill the monster, it's gone. But actually, aside from the Indominus and maybe the Spinosaurus, they've not actually actively tried to kill them. It's just been, we need to get away and we need to leave it alone, which I really respect. I think the characters as well, especially for me in Jurassic World, like Owen and Claire, their kind of friendship / relationship / whatever it is in Fallen Kingdom is, I think it's really good fun, and it adds that element of, these are genuine people. They're not just kind of props in a dinosaur film. They're there, and they give you something to connect to as well. And seeing people run away screaming from a dinosaur is always entertaining.
It never gets old.
No, it really doesn't. It doesn't matter what dinosaur it is.
It really doesn't. Yeah. Which of the films would you say is your favorite, probably?
Oh, you can't ask me that. I think it's probably a little bit controversial, to be honest, but I actually think that Fallen Kingdom is probably my favourite. And now I can watch all of them any time of day and love them all, but there's something about the way they've taken dinosaurs in so many different areas, and it's exciting no matter whether they're in a park or on a separate site B or wherever they are. The fact that this was the first time that they were properly introduced, they were supposed to be like in a location. I know that obviously with the Lost World we had the Tyrannosaurs on the ship, but with Fallen Kingdom it's like, well, the island's gone, so there's nowhere else for them to be. And how they kind of navigated the moral implications and how that progresses, and then to throw into the mix what I thought was a really cool looking hybrid, which I think is very realistic. I think that if that technology was available, I do think that people would go, okay, yeah, I mean, you see it, like as Claire Dearing says herself, people look at a Stegosaurus like it's an elephant at the zoo. People would eventually get bored of it. And so, of course, they would end up mixing it up and seeing what they could make. So the fact that it then went from that innocent kind of, we just want to, entertain people, to warfare, I think is it progresses the way I think it actually would. I just, the flow of the film, the references to other films in it as well, I really love, with the Indoraptor tapping the claw and Maisie pushing down the shaft, and, everything like that. I think it's just really nicely done. So, probably not the one people usually would admit to, but for me, I think Fallen Kingdom was really nicely done.
To be honest with you, I also really have a deep appreciation for Fallen Kingdom. Like, it's probably my third favorite of them, which is also, as you said, very rare. Like, it gets a lot of hate, and I have a lot of issues with it, like so many, But
Yeah.
there's something about it, and I attribute a lot of that to J.A. Bayona and Oscar Faro's cinematography and the way they did that. Just like, it's just
Mm.
a beautiful film to watch, and the animals look incredible, and it has a lot of really interesting Crichton um moral questions in it that
Yeah.
haven't really been present in a lot of them, and I really love it too. I'm happy to hear that you are a fan as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's an opinion I don't always voice, but at the same time, it's like, wow, it's the end of the day. They're films; they're there to entertain, and they're going to
Yeah.
entertain people in different ways, aren't they? So, yeah, definitely.
Have you seen season 2 of Camp Cretaceous yet?
I have. I saw it the day it came out. I watched the entire
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, immediately. Me too. How did you feel when they shot the baryonyx?
Oh
Because that
God.
was, as far as I can tell, like kind of the first time a
Mm.
dinosaur was shot and killed in a Jurassic
Um,
film, actually.
yeah, it really shocked me, especially the way that obviously I know that we as adults appreciate Camp Cretaceous for all the Jurassic Park reference and being in that franchise, but also the fact that I work with children as my normal job, so for them to be brave enough to put something like that into the episode, I was like, wow, okay, and it was quite upsetting to watch because you as much as yes, they're the scary kind of villain type dinosaurs throughout the season. It's very much you don't want them to die though. You just want them to go away. So yeah, it was a bit of
Yeah.
a shock, but I
Yeah.
appreciated them for doing it, and I did think it was I think it fitted. I didn't think it was out of place that they did it. It was just shocking that they did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love Camp Cretaceous. I think they're doing really, really awesome things. I mean, in the second season, some of it really stretches the suspension of disbelief for me, but
Mm.
I really value what they're doing with it. What they can do with it in that context, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's hard sometimes I think to look at it and remember that it is actually aimed at younger people. So, some of the things they say in it, I know there was a big controversy over the Stegosaurus plates. Dare I mention it?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at the same time there is the argument that I saw a lot going around, which is, well, actually they're not actual dinosaurs, that they're going to have defects, and actually if you look at the
yeah,
books, that their defects are actually much less looked at than they are in the original
yeah.
books.
In the films, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but it's also kind of the whole, this, it is for children, and they're going to say something that probably is just a throwaway line, and they probably sat there afterwards, looked on Twitter and went, oh, why?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Oh
yeah,
no, the paleontologists are here! Run away! But yeah, no. I think for what it's trying to do, and for me, it's so lovely that they're creating something that is more child friendly. That means that younger people are going to have interest in dinosaurs, and as they get older, and if they continue that interest, they'll learn that things that are said and are portrayed aren't exactly accurate, and that they'll learn that in their own time. But the fact that they're trying to bring these films down to a level where younger people can enjoy them without being scared, because the animatronics are scary. Like the first Jurassic Park film,
yeah,
I still sit there at the kitchen scene. I could probably describe it to you word for word what happens, but I
yeah,
still sit there like, so to be able to give children something that is that little bit, calmer to an extent, but at least cartoonized, so it feels
yeah.
like it's easier. I think is brilliant. So yeah, I've got a lot of love for it, to be honest with you.
Oh, me too. I love it so much. And so like there's like kind of like an Asda big department store thing here in the US called Target.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar, but there's one that just opened up a few blocks from where I live here in LA. And I can't do anything here because everything's shut down in LA, and I live in a little shoebox. So like I go to walk to the Target, walk back from the Target, but one of my favorite things to do is to look in the toy section and see all the little kids like freaking out over the dinosaur toys. Like every single time I go, there's a little kid losing his mind or her mind over a dinosaur toy, a Jurassic toy, and walking around with it and playing with it, and it fills my heart with so much joy to see that.
Yeah.
It's a great time to be a dinosaur lover. I
Oh,
I love
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, and I mean as well here, I've noticed. Well, I mean, I work with very much early years kind of children, so really small kind of aged. Like the oldest child I think I've worked with is 4 years old. Um, but because of where the Jurassic World films have come out, and it has caused this big stir up again, I see so many more children in like just dinosaur patterned stuff, whether it's Jurassic Park or not.
Oh yeah.
And we have like I personally make sure we have dinosaurs in the room for them to play with, but they are so much more readily available, and children are trying to say their names and stuff. It is quite funny, but they're trying and they're showing with interest, and I really wish we had Target here because those toys look really good. But sadly, there's nothing in my local shop, unfortunately. But
that's terrible.
I know, but I think it's
Well, if there are any toys that you want me to get for you and mail to you, just let me know. I will try to get them.
Well, I would be very grateful. I'll send you a little list, and if you don't mind going shopping for me, that'd be great.
As I said, that's like the only thing I do is walk to the Target and look at the dinosaurs and then walk back home. So it'd really be very easy for me to do.
Oh, fantastic! If you can find a real one while you're there, that'd be great.
Well, there's a lot of seagulls there.
Oh, okay.
So
Same actually.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
I'll you get so many.
Take what you can get
now. Yeah.
So what is what are your Jurassic fantasies? In your heart of hearts, what would you love to see in the future of the franchise?
I really want them to, especially with Dominion and everything that's coming up, especially with everything kind of culminating in this one film. I really want the dinosaurs to live. I don't want them to have done all these films and have done all this moral, should they be here, shouldn't they be here, for, the most delightful little girl that we all wish we were, pressing a button and letting them out. Even after her horrific first impression of a dinosaur. It's not the way to learn that what you think a dinosaur looks like. I just think it'd be such a shame if they turned around and were like, oh yeah, so they got out, so we did what we could, we sanctioned it, and we got rid of them all. Like, I would love to see just little things like maybe they have a radar system that says what area the T-Rex is in, a bit like if I believe there's like tornado warnings and stuff and sirens and stuff. Maybe they have stuff like that instead to say, oh, massive carnivore in the area, go inside. I would love to see them flourish and just see, like, instead, like, just in a herd of cows, there's just a stegosaurus wandering around like, yeah, I'm just here, it's fine. And people have just kind of got used to them. I'd love to see more types of dinosaur included. I think it's really, like, it's easy to put the standard, no dinosaur standard, but the ones that we all know, like obviously Velociraptor is the only raptor that's shown. It would be great to see like a Utahraptor. It'd be great to see
so far.
Yeah, so far. We don't know what's going to happen yet. But yeah. So I'd love to see it kind of finish with Dominion film wise, but I'd love it if they did a TV series. I would love a TV series watching Owen train the raptors.
Oh, hang on a second. I'm having a problem here. Hang on. Sorry. Hang on. All right, so where we were talking about how it would be cool if the predators, rather than be like eliminated, could have like a tag that would alert people of their presence and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they have similar systems in place for lions and stuff. They have ways of keeping them away from livestock and people and such. So I don't think it would be totally far fetched to be able to do that with a T-Rex. I just don't want her to meet her end in any way, shape, or form. So if that happens, I think I'm just you'll find me crying in a corner. So.
Yeah, it'll be much worse than Jurassic Park 3, I suspect.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Another kind of thing I would love to see is the whole kind of, we got a couple of video snaps in Fallen Kingdom, but I'd love to see like I don't know, maybe a Netflix original of Owen with the raptors when they're smaller and watch that progression. and just see and actually just see how Jurassic World was built and how they actually, after the disaster of Jurassic Park, and then obviously everything that happened in the Lost World, and then Jurassic Park 3, how after all of that, the government somewhere still went, yeah, go on then, why not?
Yeah.
You know, so I'd really love to see like the creation of Jurassic World. How did Claire become and get to where she is? How did Henry Wu stay, you know, around after that? You'd think that
Yeah.
it'd be like, nope, you're suspended from making anything ever again. But you know, he seems to thrive in any situation. So it'd be really interesting to see. So it's just something like that. I'd love to kind of go into like the details of stuff we already have. You know, I mean, to be honest, if they put a GoPro on the T-Rex, I'd follow it around and just watch a live cam of that. So, you know,
Oh yeah,
I'm not too.
I never
fussy
thought about that. That would be so rad.
It wouldn't it? And you know someone would do it if dinosaurs actually end up coexisting
Oh,
with
yeah.
people. It'd be like you'd have like live stream, like people Instagram lives, watch my Stegosaurus roam around here, you know, watch my Triceratops do this, or oh, I managed to put my GoPro on a raptor, watch what it does. Like, you know, it would happen. People would. You'd see TikTok videos of people with dinosaurs. Like, it'd just be ridiculous. So I'd like to see, kind of that kind of side of things. I'd love to see the progression and how it all came about. How did they get that permission? How did people become in charge? And how did they decide what dinosaurs to create? That's the big thing, I think. When did they decide? Okay, we know we can keep a Compsognathus. So let's try a T-Rex. Like, what was the progression? You know, you don't go from a compy to a Tyrannosaur. But I'd also like to see. I'd love to see a. It's probably a pipe dream, but I would love to see and sit and watch paleontologists watching the Jurassic Park films and talking about how much that they would change if it was them and that kind of thing. I think it'd be really interesting to get the scientific take on it. I have
to tell you, that's a very controversial sort of thing. People get I mean, you're on Twitter, you've seen it. Like, people get very upset. It's a very contentious debate these days. It's heated.
Yeah, I mean, I try to kind of just say, look, they're films, they're based on fiction, and you have to remember that the dinosaurs in there look the way they do because of drawings that depicted what they would look like. These then continue and snowball on, and that's how, you know, if I show a child a picture of an actual velociraptor, the way that paleontologists believed it looked, to one of the children where I work, they would be like, no, show them a picture of blue, and they'd be like, blue raptor, because that's what they've learned. And I understand that's
it's just problematic really, because like it is, because that was like the 80s, you know, like that was the 80s, and now it's so pervasive that even though we are well past that, because of that, it's still continuing. So like kids today are like so far behind, you know, so it is a complicated issue for me, at least. But I understand what you're saying. Absolutely. I think it's time to move past that with the next phase of the franchise, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be interesting to see if they actually show what they would actually look like as close as we can get with the technology we have and the obviously the findings that have been seen. It's a debate that, because I'm not a paleontologist, my actual knowledge of dinosaurs is very much old books that my granddad gave me that are probably just as out of date as the films, if not more. But I enjoy the aesthetic value of the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park franchise, and you know, I think as long as you don't take it,
they're classic designs, they're characters.
Yeah, exactly. They are. They're
I mean, the Velociraptor, the Jurassic Park Velociraptor, lives rent free in my mind until the end of time. Like it's just such an iconic, incredible character. It's so huge. It's a perfect creation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as long as when children get to that point where they've seen it, or like younger generations have seen the films and they have that interest in dinosaurs, as long as they're then shown that actually that is fiction and this is where we actually are now, then I don't see a lot of harm in it. It's when it's kind of they get stuck in that, nope, this is what they look like, I won't accept reality because this is what I believe reality is. But there's it's a difficult one, but I think as long as you can separate them, I think it's fine, and I'm happy to enjoy the films and enjoy what paleontologists and other people say about dinosaurs, how they look now. Like, I love both sides of it. Like, just give me dinosaurs, I don't care.
Yeah. Speaking of dinosaurs, what would your of all the prehistoric extinct critters, what would be the number one extinct critter that you would love to see show up in the Jurassic franchise?
Oh gosh,
that hasn't yet.
Yeah, that hasn't yet. I'm really a big fan of Liopleurodon. So I first found out about it in the Walking with Dinosaurs series that the BBC did, and I think the sheer size, the way it moves, and I think they got close with the mosasaur. When I first saw the trailer for Jurassic World, and it was like a water arena, there was a little part of me that was like, "Oh my god, you're going to do it!" But I think that would have been maybe a little bit too far. But yeah, I think I would love to see. I would love to see one. I think that would just be, especially now they're playing with the idea of dinosaurs being in the same world as us. There's certainly scope for there to be more aquatic life in there. So yeah, I think that would be the number one for me, definitely. What about you? What would you want to see?
If you were to have, oh well, I mean, in the first episode of the podcast, it was entirely about that for me, which was Quetzalcoatlus. I just want.
I've
wanted Quetzalcoatlus for like 20 years now, just more maybe. And I mean, there's so many, but Quetzalcoatlus is probably the number one for me.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a good choice.
Yeah. If you were to have any extinct pet, de-extincted pet, what would it be? What would your de-extincted pet be?
A bad idea, any of them. But I think I'm going to have to be really basic, and it would have to be a T-Rex. Ever since I was little, it's always been a T-Rex. I don't think that would ever change.
Yeah.
But it would be, as younger me very firmly believed, it would be trained, and it would only like me, and I would never have a problem with it. So that's what little me believes. Older me is a bit like, keep it to your Jurassic World Evolution playthrough, but the rest is fine. I think it would have to be.
What's kind of cool about T-Rex and having it be a pet is that in recent years we've learned that they were probably much more intelligent than we expected, and they were more social than we expected. And so those two factors are like two of the main factors that would make for a good pet, so to speak. One that's intelligent and socially oriented. So a Tyrannosaur might not be the worst option as far as
I mean,
if
the intelligence is really as good as we hope it is, then I think I could get a good recall in a dog park. I think I could get to sit and stay. I think we'd be all right.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
I would. 100% would.
Let's see, what else can I ask? What are your hopes for Dominion?
I hope that they don't do any more of the big kind of hybrids. I think that's kind of been explored, and I love it. I absolutely love them, but I think to do more, especially with the Maisie storyline, I don't want it to go into, people clone ethics.
Yeah.
There's plenty of films about that. Like, I want it to stick with dinosaurs. My hopes are that we get a lot of Alan and Ellie time, 100%. And you know, I'm really looking forward to the interactions between the old and new characters. Like I cannot wait to see how they actually interact. I don't want Dr. Grant to like Owen. I don't want him to. I don't want it to be like this. Oh yeah. You know, we both like dinosaurs. I want it to be no. They should be in the ground. I dig them out of the ground. That's where they belong.
Yeah.
And he's obviously going to be. I almost really want a scene where you have Alan and Owen stood there and they're talking about whatever, disagreeing, whatever, and then Blue will turn up, and you have Alan being like, "Oh," and Owen being like, "Oh, hey, Blue, it's all good." You know, I just think that'd be so funny, and it would be a really interesting dynamic. I'm really hoping that we get a lot of T-Rex time, but safe T-Rex time. I don't want anything to happen to Rexy. That's not allowed. I want it to be. I just really like for it to be really satisfying and just an ending that is just, you know, it doesn't have to be some big shock. It doesn't have to be some crazy, you know, over the top ending. Just something that's like, you know what, it all accumulated to this. Dinosaurs just live with us now. Everyone deal with it. It's fine. Is what I want. But whether I get that,
I mean,
not,
me too. That's what I want.
Yeah. So they're kind of my hopes. Is just some really good dynamics and lots of dinosaurs and T-Rex time. 100%.
Yeah, I that's more or less pretty much what I'm hoping for too. Well, Alice, thank you so much for participating in this. It was such a joy and pleasure to chat with you and have you participate in this.
No, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. It's nice to kind of chat with people, especially yourself, about different things to do with the Jurassic franchise, because it all kind of lives in my head, and it's nice to actually chat about it. And especially when we've got very similar opinions on it, it's nice to be like, yeah, I think that too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be, the audio is going to be in the audio podcast in one of the episodes, maybe the one I'm doing next. And then on the YouTube version, it'll have the video and probably more of the conversation. Because on the podcast, I have to like make it shorter, but on YouTube it can be longer.
Of course,
so it'll be more of it on the YouTube version, and then a little bit more or a little bit less on the audio podcast.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, well, thank you so much for chatting to me. It's been really, really nice.
Absolutely.
I look forward to hopefully chatting with you again soon.
Absolutely. Alice, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate all of your patience and helping deal with all the technical stuff.
No worries at all. Anytime. If you need a guinea pig, just, you know, you've got my email now.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alice.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this installment of NeoJurassic. Until next time, bye.